All right, this review is going to go over what is primarily a multiple choice part of our final exam for Algebra 2. There's also going to be a little bit of gridded response on here as well, but the topics that are covered on this review will cover everything on the test. So step 1, they want you to simplify the expression. We're going to do that by distributing the 3 into here, and then be careful on the second part, you're distributing in -2. So this expression becomes 3x minus 24. And then we have a minus 8x, and then careful here, this is a plus 10. So you're not solving, you're just simplifying, which means you're going to combine your like terms. 3 plus -8 is -5x. And then we have -24 plus 10, which is a -14. So there's no further simplification, you are not solving. Again, I want to reiterate that. And do go slowly on those types of questions because they're very easy to make mistakes on. And when it's a multiple choice question, I'm usually looking for those common mistakes. All right, I'm going to do number 5 next just because I'm going to go in order of what's on my screen. So a copier company charges a rental fee of $2. It's a flat cost. Plus, they charge 5 cents, for each print. And they want you to, you're going to be selecting the appropriate choice on the question for the test, but today we're going to have to just write it from scratch. So the number of prints they want you to call P, and the total cost they want you to call C. So total cost is a flat fee of $2, and then plus 5 cents times every print, which they want me to use P. All right, moving along. We have number 2. This is one of those LCM questions where you want to find a common multiple that will knock out a 3 and a 4. And if you're ever in a jam, you can always just multiply the denominators together. So 3 times 4 is 12. That also happens to be our least common multiple anyways. So you're distributing a 12, and you're multiplying it by every single term. And by no means do you need to do that in your brain. You can use your calculator to do 2/3 times 12. When you type 2 divided by 3 times 12, you get 8x plus, and then 12 times 1/4 is plus 3. Equals 12 times 3/4 is 9x, and then 12 times 5/3 is a minus 20. And now you have a 2-step equation to solve. You're going to bring all the x's to one side of the equation. It's up to you which side. I'm going to go to the right, which means the opposite side needs to collect all my constants. I'm going to add the 20 over here to the left. And we end up with 23 equals 1x. Now, this particular question on the review came out to a nice integer, but I will tell you on the test, it's probably going to come out to a fraction, and you want to make sure you reduce your fraction, so always remember to hit math, enter, enter on that question. All right, number 6, you don't actually have to solve it, they just want to know what would you do if you were trying to eliminate the x's. So if you need the x's to knock out, they would have to be the same number, but opposite signs. So I would have to change this to a 12, but not just any 12, it would have to be a -12. So you'd have to multiply this top equation by a -3. That's how you would create those additive inverses that would knock out the x's. This next question is very much like number 2, where you got to solve it and make sure you give a reduced fraction answer if possible. So we multiply 4 times the quantity 2x plus 5 equals the other diagonal, which is 2 times the quantity x minus 3, and then you have to distribute through. So, new equation ends up being, let's see, 8x plus 20 equals 2x minus 6. And then again, it's an equation, 2-step equation. You want to bring all the x's to one side. I'm going to bring the x's to the left this time, which means your constants need to move to the right. Always check in your mental math on your calculator, especially on an important test like a final exam. You end up with 4x. No, you don't. You end up with 6x. That was ironic. 6x equals -32. And then when you divide by 6 on both sides, this is going to be a reduced fraction. So type this in and then hit math, enter, enter. And you get, let's see, -16/3. So make sure that if it's asking for a reduced fraction that you hit math, enter, enter. All right, this next one, it's going to be multiple choice and you're going to select the appropriate system. If you need to do some highlighting, that would be a good place to start, there are some key pieces of information in this question. It says 12 vans, 9 buses, 645 students. That's one equation. And then what else we have here? 6 vans, 2 buses, 282 students. So assuming we use V and B, 12 vans plus 9 buses for 645 total. And then 6 vans, 2 buses for a total of 282. At no point do you need to solve that system. You're just picking the right one that is the appropriate setup. All right, here, this is where we lock down the A, and we think about moving terms around. So we would start by moving the 2 by subtracting it. And then you just write down what you have. So t minus 2, now it equals 3 times A. And then again, you've locked down that A, so you're trying to isolate the A. That means you have to get rid of this 3. So we would divide by 3 on both sides. So you would select the option that says A equals t minus 2 over 3. Again, multiple choice questions. So you can kind of look through the answers and determine which one's proper. Okay, number 8. We have an absolute value equation. The absolute value bars are already isolated. So now you're ready to set up your 2 problems. The first problem, easy peasy, just take off the bars. So 3x minus 6 equals 24. And then the second equation, you take off the bars still, but now it equals negative 24. So you negate the answer. You're going to solve, of course. And you get, what do we get? 3x equals 30. So after you divide by 3 on both sides, you get x equals 10. And there's another solution because of the second problem. Adding 6 to both sides here gives you a little different solution, though. You get 3x equals negative 18. And then, remember, you're dividing by 3. I don't know why I didn't do that in another color. Here we go. Divide by 3, divide by 3. You get x equals negative 6 as well. So on those absolute value questions, you're setting up and solving 2 separate problems. Alright, now we have, you should be able to tell from the sign that this is an AND problem, because remember, if it's a less than or equal to, you're working with an AND. And you're still going to set up 2 problems. The first one, you just take the bars off. And then the next one, you reverse the sign, and you negate the 24. So, adding 6, dividing by 2, there's your first part of your solution, and, let's see, same thing here, adding 6, dividing by 2, there's the second part of your solution. However, this being a multiple choice question, they want the answer in interval notation, so you can go ahead and graph it if you'd like. That might help you out with the way the interval shapes up. Negative 9 first, 15 next. I want everything greater than negative 9 and everything less than 15, so, or equal to. So we're looking at ands or in between, right? Sandwich problems. So the interval solution that we would have to select is bracket negative 9 to 15. Kind of ran out of space there, might be odd, but that's the solution to that question. So even though it didn't ask for all 3 parts, I always suggest you guys go ahead and answer all 3 parts. Alright, I'm going to move over to number 14. It says, is this a function? So what you have to do is you have to look at all the x values, and since x's do not repeat, yes, it's a function. If there's a single x value that shows up twice or more, that means it's not a function. So keep that in mind. Alright, radical form. The radical form is the index number goes in the corner here, and then of course there's a radical, and then there's power outside. So when I look at the fraction, the 4, this number right there, that's the power, and then the 3, the denominator of the fraction, is the index. So what this problem really says is it is the cube root of 8, and it's being raised to the 4th power. So you do have to memorize that formula, that when you have a fraction exponent like that, its power being divided by the index. That's kind of hard for kids to remember. I wish I had good advice for that other than you just got to memorize it. All right, the domain. Remember, domain is synonymous with the x values. However, this domain is not an interval because it's just a list. So the x's, if you list them out, technically they can go in any order, but they're probably going to go in numerical order on your test. So -4, and then 2, and then 12. I always use set brackets for this question. You could also just list them, but remember, it's a multiple choice question that I wrote, so I probably wrote them in set brackets. All right, number 11. Exponent rules. When you try to multiply the bases together, in order to combine them, you're going to add the exponents. Of course, you can math enter those on your calculator. So this becomes x to the, okay, let's see, I don't have a calculator open, so if I try to do 4/5 plus 1/4, you guys do not have to do this by hand. I have no calculator. Plus, I'm a math teacher, I should be able to do this, right? So we have 16 over 20 plus 5 over 20, so those add up to 21 over 20 as your new exponent. Same number you would have got had you done 4/5 plus 1/4 math enter. Okay, here the rule is when you're trying to divide these bases, you're going to subtract the exponents. So again, on your calculator works for me. Otherwise, I'm going to have to do this by hand. So 3/8 minus, instead of 1/4, I'm going to call that 2/8. So my new exponent is going to be 1/8. So this is x to the 1/8 power is our solution, or simplification, I should say. All right, remember domain, that's a listing of all your x values. However, because there's arrows on the end of this curve, you're going to need to remember that the domain in this case goes forever. So it goes from -infinity, and it never stops, keeps going to infinity. Okay, simplifying radicals, break them down. This is a square root. So if you think of taking the square root of 36 separately from taking the square root, remember square root, of x to the 6th, and then separate from that, you're going to take the square root of y to the 8th. You can break each one of those down all the way. Square root of 36 is 6. Square root of x to the 6th, you just divide, remember, power by index, so that's x to the 3rd. And then square root of y to the 8th, you just divide power by index, and you get y to the 4th. Oh boy, piecewise. Okay, so you have a piecewise function, and they want you to evaluate f of -1. That means you're going to plug in x equals -1. However, you have this top function that you only use if your x is less than 2. And then this bottom function here, you would only use if your x is greater than or equal to 2. So since our x is -1, that falls into this category where it's less than 2. So using your blue function, I need you to plug in x equals -1 and then tell me what answer you get. So that'd be -2 minus 3, which is -5. That is your evaluation for that piecewise function. So this one, they want to know about how's it related. That's fancy talk for transformations. So an x plus 7 inside the absolute value bars means that it was shifted left 7. Remember those good transformation words. All right, vertex, easy peasy lemon squeezy, and if you forgot, you could just type it in your calculator. Opposite built-in negative right here, so -5, comma, -4. Factoring completely means you should always first look for a common factor. These can both be divided by not just an 8, but also an 8x. And if you were to take out the 8x, or literally divide by 8x on both of these terms, you'd still be left with 1x and then plus 3. And that is the complete factorization. Now, this being a multiple choice question, if you got in a jam, you could just kind of FOIL and distribute all the choices together and see which one is equivalent. All right, although sometimes you do have to be nervous that maybe it's not completely factored, so make sure you go through all your options. All right, this is a difference of two squares pattern, where they're both perfect squares, so you're going to square root each of them. The square root of 16x squared is 4x. And then the square root of 49 is 7. And then one of the factors is positive, and one of the factors is negative. It's our favorite factoring pattern, huh? Alright, this one, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through it. However, I'm going to kind of sketch out what you're going to do. This is going to go into y1. Of course, you're going to use x's, though, right? Negative 16x squared plus 100x plus 5. And they want to know when the arrow hits the ground. So you're going to have to kind of mess with your window a little bit until you can get your curve. And it's going to look like this. You need to see when it hits the ground, which means you need to figure out this number right here. In order to find that, I mean, you could always estimate it on your calculator, and with it being a multiple choice question, maybe you can get away with that. Otherwise, you're going to go to your calc menu, which is second trace, and then you're going to choose the one, it's number 2 in the list, it's called 0, because that's when it hits the ground. And then you have to do that left bound, right bound business. So I think I actually keyed this. It should come out to 6.3 seconds. But again, guys, if you were looking at your tick marks and it was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you could tell it was in between 6 and 7 seconds, if there's only one option that looks appropriate, then go ahead and choose it. Alright, this one, they want domain, which we've talked about 3 times now. It's all the x values for that function. So when you graph this on your calculator, it was a square root graph. It was shifted left 3 and up 2. So left 3, up 2, it starts here and it kind of looks like this. So the domain of this function would start right here at negative 3 and then go on to the right forever. They would want you to create the equation of the circle. I noticed that this circle has a center at, what is it, negative 2, positive 1. And then I can also tell, if I count carefully, that the radius is 2. So you wouldn't be creating the function, you'd just be matching up the circle with the proper function. Easy peasy, right? This is x, this is y. An h value of negative 2 means this is x plus 2. And then a k value of 1 would make this y minus 1. There are built-in negatives in both the x and y this time. And then remember, it's your radius squared, so we're going to put a 4 on the back end there. Alright, this question again is on your calculator. So you're going to be typing this into y1, and this time they want the maximum height. So after you get it typed into your calculator and you adjust your window a little bit, you end up with a need to find this ordered pair right here. So you're going to be using your calculator, you're going to go back to the second trace menu, the calc menu, and this time you're going to choose the maximum. You're going to do that left bound, right bound thing. But when they say find the maximum height, that would be whatever this y value is. The time that it occurs is not asked, they just want to know the height. So the height is the y value. Make sure you're answering the right question. You know what? I think I have that answer, and I think it comes out to 31 feet. Again, you can estimate, of course. Alright, axis of symmetry is the line that cuts the through the vertex. It cuts the parabola in half. So if your vertex is at negative 5, 1, that means your axis of symmetry is the line x equals negative 5. I think I said the wrong thing. It was negative 5. So whatever this number is, direct correlation to it because it goes straight through your vertex. Alright, they want you to solve, so make sure you don't just factor, but you keep going. So on number 27, needs to, remember your back numbers need to multiply to 24, negative 24, excuse me, and then the arches have to add up to 5, negative 5. So what if we tried negative 8 and positive 3? So that would work, but remember you're trying to solve them, so now you have to take your factors and actually go through the process of solving them by setting them equal to 0. So you get x equals 8, but also x equals negative 3. Don't be alarmed if on the test you see it written in set notation. That just means you have a listing of answers, more than one, and they write them in little weird brackets like that. Does not mean the ordered pair, it's just a listing. Okay, almost there. Here we go. Solve by square rooting. Surely we can do this. Square root both sides. This is the moment where your plus or minus will show up. So you have x minus 6 equals both positive and negative, but 28 doesn't fully break down, but it will partially break down. So it's 4 times 7 but you have a better name for square root of 4. That's really a 2 times the square root of 7. And then final step is you're going to add the 6 over. So x equals add the 6 over 6, which cannot be combined with the plus or minus 2 square roots of 7 part. So you do have two solutions there. You have 6 plus 2 square roots of 7 and 6 minus 2 square roots of 7. But I like your answer if you leave it like that. Real quick, we can do quadratic formula, where your a value is 2, your b value is -3, and your c value is -8. And it will be given to you in quadratic formula question. So x equals starts off with the opposite of b. So the opposite of b would be a +3, and then plus or minus square root of b squared. Now if you're going to type -3 squared, that's fine, but we kept encouraging you guys to just call this a 9, because a lot of you were messing up on your negatives in the formula. And then -4 times a, which we said was a 2, and then times c, which is a -8. And all of that over 2 times a. Now you're going to need to simplify this. So we always ask that you guys calculate the discriminant portion first, which is all this stuff underneath the radical. Don't actually type the radical though. So it's 3 plus and minus, still a square root of, let's see, oh goodness gracious, that's 64. I feel like I did something stupid there. I think it's 73. Yeah, I already keyed this. Yeah. So it's the square root of 73, which, good news for you, this doesn't simplify at all. Square root of 73 doesn't reduce, so we're just going to leave our answer like that. Alright, multiplying i's. We distribute. 3 times 2 is 6. And then 3 times 9i is plus 27i. And then keep going. We have -8i times 2 is -16i. And then the -8 also gets multiplied, -8i gets multiplied by 9i, so that's -72i squared. But you're not going to be able to stop until your answer is in what we call a plus bi form. So we have to remind ourselves that I squared is really a -1. So this term here is really a plus 72, because it's -72 times -1, which you are going to combine with the 6 that's out in front. And then of course you're going to combine these green i's right here. So plus, oh I should be able to add, right, 11i. It's a slow day for Mrs. Abruzzo. Alright, so you have 78 when you combine these numbers, and then plus 11i. Awesome. Alright, our favorite question. Square both sides, although this one's not too bad. The square root and square function will cancel, and you get 2x plus 8. And then 6 squared is 36. And then you solve. And yes, these are the ones where you should be careful about maybe having extraneous solutions. But turns out when you solve this one, you plug it back in. It works out beautifully. So let's pretend I checked that. And we are almost home free. This is, I think, yeah, our last slide. Here we go. Simplify the square root of -81. Well, 81 is a perfect square. So that's going to come out in front of the first radical, or it will be the first radical. We're going to separate it from the -1. And then you don't have anything in the leftover radical this time because 81 is a perfect square. So the square root of 81 is 9, and the square root of -1, better known as I. So this is 9i. Because we are just simplifying and not solving, there is no plus or minus on this question, so it's just 9i. And then here you're subtracting some complex numbers, so just be careful, guys. We have a 4 minus 12, better known as -8. And then you have a 3i minus -9i. So 3 minus -9 is plus 12i. That should be a really easy question, right? But man, kids mess that one up. They're just going too fast. Alright, that is the second half of your final exam for Algebra 2 here in Semester 1. I wish everybody all the luck, and I hope you have a great winter break.